Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic? Let's do it. What's the craziest or weirdest thing in your field that you believe to be true, but is not backed by anything factual yet? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
Chestnut blight was introduced in the United States in the early 1900s, and since then, all American chestnuts in much of the US cannot mature properly and will die at nearly uniform stage in development. Much of the work I did in college was looking at the issue of the blight. My master's took me to propose that the chestnut gall wasp has a direct link to developmental challenges introduced by hormonal changes within the chemistry of the C4 pathway photosynthesis. These changes are directly influencing a protein coupling mechanism failure and aiding the blight of the chestnut. My doctoral thesis is showing this without a doubt and will soon present ways to offset the population growth of the gall wasp and will soon allow chestnuts to regrow naturally. They will dominate our landscape again, as they did early in our history. I have a personal specimen in the Smithsonian credited to my professor and me for being the first ones to document the gall wasp this far north on the east coast. Paleontology. Darwin's dilemma refers to the absence of known macroscopic fossils, i.e. excluding microbial stuff, from beneath the base of the Cambrian period, i.e. older than 541 million years, when he was first describing his theory of evolution. Everyone, including Darwin, expected that when fossils were found from before the Cambrian period, they would be ancestors of modern animals. Then, when those fossils were found, the Ediacara biota, we call them, after the Ediacara Hills in South Australia, they were enthusiastically classified as ancient jellyfish, ancient worms, etc. But it turns out that's a load of crap. Consensus is growing that almost none of those classifications were accurate. Instead, most Ediacaran organisms seem to have belonged to extinct groups unrelated to anything alive today, and they lived in a world that was so different from the following 540 million years that they had modes of life distinct from any living macroscopic organisms. We were so eager to make everything fit into our neat little evolutionary narrative that for decades we basically glossed over these crazy alien sort of ecosystems that could be critical to understanding the origins of complex life on other planets as well as our own. We're still just beginning to really understand it though. It's a very controversial field of paleontology. Chemistry. We will eventually be able to efficiently design enzymes to conduct complicated chemical transformations that would be otherwise impossible on unmodified substrates. A 2008 science paper, David Baker, Ken Houck, Forrest Michael, and a bunch of other awesome scientists showed proof of principle in designing a Diels aldehyde enzyme in silico. They designed the necessary transition state and the protein sequence that would form the corresponding active site, built the protein and it catalyzed the exact reaction they intended to catalyze. It's beautiful work, and they have done a lot of incredible things since then. Scott Miller's group at Yale has done similar things using much smaller peptide catalysts to do site-specific modifications of things like vancomycin, which is a huge antibiotic in a very selective manner. What does this mean? Taking, for example, the development of antibiotics, we're running into problems of resistance. Bugs are developing immunity to existing antibiotics. Even our last resorts, like vancomycin, are starting to fail. We can bypass their resistance mechanisms by modifying the antibiotics at certain positions, but this can be an incredibly difficult process. If we could design protein catalysts to promote the desired reaction on the unmodified antibiotic in a highly selective manner, we could make libraries of antibiotics efficiently that can tide us over until we develop some other manner of treating infections. Psychology, psychiatry. there is ongoing discussion on the neurological and neurobiological correlates to depression. Psychiatry is focused on neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin because most antidepressants have effects on these transmitter systems and seem to help the patients over the course of many weeks. SSRIs take at least 3 weeks to show measurable, non-placebo effects in patients. But, as a matter of fact, we still do not know why. A German psychiatrist now proposed a new model for depression, explaining it with chronic overdose of cortisol, a hormone closely associated with stress. He was even able to treat patients with a cortisol antagonist successfully within hours of treatment. Very short explanation of the theory, actually. His work has not been acknowledged very much until now, but I wouldn't be surprised if there's something true to it. Classics, archaeology, ancient science. A little late to the game on this one, and I'm not exactly a scientist, but here's my weird fact that may be true, although it is based on tenuous evidence. What we've found definitively in anthropological studies of cultures with a strong oral tradition, the one I'm familiar with is studies of peoples in the Balkans, is that oral memory is a lot better in other cultures that rely less on writing. That, for instance, is why the Iliad and Odyssey could be passed down by oral tradition for centuries before they were written down, relatively intact. As a result of this, some scholars have made the case that the date of the fall of Troy is preserved in the Iliad and Odyssey, based on their descriptions of astronomical phenomena, some of which are more dubious readings than others. The date given by astronomical dating lines up with the date archaeologists have determined for the destruction of Troy Villa, which the consensus of scholars accepts to be the Homeric Troy. Biomedical science. Giving Viagra to pregnant women will help combat obesity. It is well known in science that being born small or growth restricted is strongly correlated with later obesity, hypertension, heart disease, and type 2 diabetes. These babies are ill-equipped for the calorie-rich world in which we live, and as a result, their bodies proficiently store fat and essentially gobble up any glucose or fat that enters their bodies. A huge amount of the obesity we see today may be due to growth restriction. Viagra works by opening up the blood vessels in the penis to allow an erection. Viagra could similarly open up blood vessels to the placenta and therefore the baby, providing them with more nutrients in the womb to help them grow. We're currently testing this theory in mice, rats, and sheep. Clinical trials in humans about to start. Cetology. It is suspected that at least some baleen whales can echolocate to at least a rudimentary extent. This is due to several recordings of abnormal whistles produced during the rescue of several humpback whales on different occasions. Humpback whales occasionally get lost in river systems and need to be aided in getting out. Also, it is likely that bottlenose and possibly other dolphins are able to follow magnetic lines, a likely reason for many beachings. Currently, there is some observed evidence of this. However, there has not been a mechanism for this navigation that has been isolated as of yet. Not a surprise, as it takes about a dozen or so nerve cells to do this, and dolphins have over 1 billion cells in their bodies. Biology. When personal genomic sequencing becomes readily accessible, even as a routine medical service, much like a physical, we should be able to place the data into a controlled, anonymized database and use statistical analysis to essentially link most disease states and predispositions to their genotypic bases. There are loads of combinational black holes in the genome data right now, since we haven't been able to collect large-scale, high-throughput disease genotype relationships on a genomic scale yet due to the expense. Have a look at the company 23andMe for an example of a smaller scale version of this. They represent a good first step toward breaking the cost down and making personal genomics accessible regardless of socioeconomic status. Chemistry. A lot of the accepted mechanisms for the way reactions occur are incomplete at best. Example, water and alkali metals go boom. The accepted mechanism is that the metal dissolves and loses an electron, which goes to an H plus to an H, which combines with another H to make H2, then the heat causes the H2 to combust. However, recent observations of various colors associated with metal vapor evolving during the reaction suggest the metal may be vaporizing at the interface with water, and that this reaction is occurring in the gas phase rather than a simple dissolution of the solid and subsequent electron exchange. Edit. So a lot of people don't like the alkali metal with water example. So here's a bit about my own research. I'm working with a material that has been known since the 50s. It wasn't thought to be too exciting, but we understand more about the mechanism by which it forms now. We have been able to use this knowledge to add a simple compound to the mixture that slows the formation of the material. This has led us to creating the highest resolution photoresist in the world. Cancer biology. As a few other biology people have pointed out, we're now very close to being able to practically, cost-wise, sequence genomes routinely in a clinical practice. A large portion of cancer research going on now is focusing on how to take that sort of information, i.e. your cancer has these 56 mutations, and develop a therapy that is specific for you. The first proof of concept drug for this type of approach, known as personalized medicine, is erlotinib, a drug that specifically shows action in patients with mutations in the EGFR gene. It's been in the clinic for several years now. In the near future, cancer physicians will have a whole suite of these sort of targeted drugs, which work extremely well for a subset of patients while having little side effect, to give in combinations dependent on which mutations are present in your cancer. This might be a little more than 10 years out, but it is exciting and will yield positive results all along the way.
I am nothing knowledgeable when it comes to just about any of this stuff today, but the idea of specific therapies for a specific cancer in different human beings seems like a great thing, and I'm trying to resist the cynical urge in me to say that this will be way priced out of normal people or covered by any health insurance. But I think it's great, and hopefully within a generation that this could be something that sees good improvement, right?
Ecology, biology. The presence of culture in mammals has been documented in pods of orca whales. Culture in this context refers to behaviors that are passed down from generation to generation. With orca whales, we see this manifest as hunting techniques. Geographically distinct pods exhibit strikingly different hunting strategies. Certainly, the differences in these strategies arise mainly because of the differences between geographic regions. However, the idea of culture comes into play when new techniques are developed by individual whales within a pod. When a whale develops a new hunting technique, other whales take notice. If it is a significantly more successful technique, it will catch on more rapidly. Additionally, females teach hunting techniques to their young, passing on these techniques, much like alleles for different traits. The idea of culture in mammals speaks to a level of intelligence that most people don't attribute to non-humans. For some, it is easy to believe that animals such as whales, dolphins, and chimpanzees could develop culture. But I believe it extends even further down the ladder of animal intelligence. I believe that even rodents such as squirrels, prairie dogs, and pika could exhibit distinct culture manifesting as foraging or anti-predation behavior. I've studied a population of red squirrels in Colorado, and I firmly believe that their behavior is distinct enough from other red squirrel populations to support my beliefs regarding culture in mammals. A number of unpopular experiments from the 1970s onward demonstrated that some kind of impermanent evolution in plants was occurring. This would present a significant challenge to our understanding of biological evolution. A good example is that you can stunt specific species of trees for about 3 generations by violently shaking the predecessor or exposing it to high winds. Then after 3 generations, the progeny returned to normal size. I was quietly collecting evidence of experiments along these lines when they discovered epigenetics a few years ago. We haven't made the direct connections yet, but genetic packaging would explain it. I'm a student in meteorology. This is more of a technological advance than something that needs to be proven. Within the next 10 to 20 years, most cars or cell phones will have microchips in them, and it will greatly increase the grid data points and spacing for forecast models. In layman's terms, forecast accuracy and forecast personalization will be near pristine down to the seconds. Microchips are already cheap enough. We just need the proper computing power to process all of that data in real time. Supercomputers to the rescue. Fluvial geomorphology. There is an argument in my field as to whether river systems operate in a state of dynamic equilibrium or a state of chaos. The long-held belief is that fluvial systems operate in a state of dynamic equilibrium, with the systems distributing their energy in an efficient way through cycles of tectonic uplift and then subsequent downcutting by erosive processes. A prominent geomorphologist, Jonathan Phillips out of the University of Kentucky, has spent the last few decades refuting this. He sees Earth's surface systems as nonlinear, dynamic, and chaotic systems. His work is very cool. He's challenging beliefs that have been held for the greater part of a century. But now, with new computational modeling techniques, testing these theories is finally possible. Oops, I didn't really share my thoughts. I think there is something to this chaotic non-equilibrium stuff. Large-scale, long-term geo-computational models are the means to confirm or deny these hypotheses. And we have the hardware capabilities, and the software is easy to obtain and will run on most newish computers. A colleague of mine is working on a worldwide geocomputational model of sediment transport. This stuff is cool as well, if you're interested. I'll put some more info here when I get to my computer. Psychology biology. This is kind of out there, but I believe hormonal birth control plays a role in subset of divorces and in the birth of children with poor immune systems. I think most people are familiar with the t-shirt study that found women were attracted to the smell of men with dissimilar immune systems, and that they felt t-shirts with similar immune systems smelled like their father or brother. Women on hormonal birth control did not perform well in that study. They often picked similar immune systems as more attractive. A massive percentage of women are on birth control due to their dating years, and when they meet their husbands after marriage, another percentage of these women will stop taking hormonal birth control in order to have children. What happens then? If you have a woman who marries a man who is a poor genetic match, someone she may not have wanted to be with if she hadn't been on birth control, when she goes off of her birth control, it stands to reason that her perception of her husband may change, given that her body and personality will be going through a change with her hormones are re-registered. Her husband's view of her may change as well. It would not surprise me if this subconscious change contributes to divorce rates. In addition, should those hypothetical people have children, the child may have a poor immune system due to lack of genetic variance between its parents. Tissue engineering. We are going to find a biological recipe for creating self-assembled tissue from scratch. Developmental biological processes can turn a single-celled zygote into an adult human. It's pretty damn incredible when you think about it. Somewhere buried in the complexity of metazoan biology are a set of origami-like rules that allow growing tissues to self-assemble into larger tissues and organs. If we can model and manipulate these programs with precision, we can engineer just about any tissue we like. A lot of people are familiar with 3D organ printing as a route to organ manufacturing, but I think it's a dead end without more knowledge of biological self-assembly. If we can't control how tissues develop, the organs will fall apart as soon as they're printed. The missing pieces of tissue self-assembly are quantitative models for tissue morphogenesis, which are being filled in as we speak by advances in vitro tissue culturing and molecular biology, like viruses that can measure gene activity over time with good spatial resolution. Anesthesiology. Surgery and other actions that can aggravate the inflammatory response might be a contributing factor to neurodegenerative disorders such as Alzheimer's. There have been some preliminary studies on stuff like this, and the data seems promising, but we have to take into account the effects of different types of anesthesia, different types of surgery, etc.